Hi, and welcome to my last video in the series of helpful hints and review for the Zoom simulation. And as a class, I have to say that if you look at, we're looking at net income or net profits, and we see that when we started the simulation, we were around 40 million was sort of our top average, and we've steadily inclined to now some teams are approaching 240 million. This team's about, let's see, 258 million, almost 256 million dollars of net profits. Astonishing. So we have three teams here: Promoter, Dental Cars. Oh no, Prowl Motors and Dental Cars are the top three teams. I think this company would come in LI Speed with fourth place, all over the 220 million mark of net profits. Astonishing. So we see that, but we see a real mix here in the middle of some teams that still haven't really embraced the wealth generation of business. And remember, companies are in business to make profits. And profits are something that you don't necessarily have to plan for the short term. You should have been planning for the long term on your profit. And if you were profit planning for the long term, meaning at some rounds you didn't earn as many points because you were building the company, it all should pay off in that last year six, year 5 and 6, if you're building the company. And we see a lot of teams did very well in profits. As far as points, we had a team here that made 939 points in year 5, and you see that they only had about 273 points in year 4, which was a building year for them. They changed their profits to be much higher, and they deployed their investments in research and development to really, make a huge amount of points in the last round. So followed by Gem Auto at 600 points, all Alset at 622, and Fortune Cars at 639. So we had at least four teams crossing over the 600 point mark. But most teams here in that 400 point average that I was talking about most of the simulation, you want to get around, 400 points per round to lock in your 2,500 points. So these teams have done very well. Now this team that had the 663 points is coming off of a 500 point round last year. But remember, they were behind for a couple of years. So even though you're behind, you could still really turn things around and rehabilitate your company quite easily in this game. It's a little bit forgiving because it's year over year stats. Okay, stock price, we still have Powell Motors in number 1 in stock price, reaching $180 per share. And we have the same number 2, but I think we have a more definitive number 3 here in Dental Cars. Ed Wheels is number 2 in stock price, meaning that investors like the company. They've been increasing. First and foremost is the increase in profits and earnings per share pushes up your stock price, but also increase in revenues and overall management of the company. So we have and we see that most companies have done very well. Like Allset has really increased from the previous year. So some companies had pretty steep inclines in stock price. And we have just these four companies down here who are melandering, meaning they've gone from a start at $5 stock price and they're still, not that far off from where they began compared to some of this is the main bulk of the classes in this range here, stock price. And then we had a phenomenal sales trajectory. If you look at this company here, Motors, both these two companies, SB Motors 25 and Motors, really had a strong increase in overall forecasting and sales increase. And we only had one team decrease in sales, which there should be no reason for decreasing in sales because the sales are growing double digits in every area. So look into that a little more closely. But most people were able to increase the sales, but we still have our number 1 LA Speed in sales, almost $1 billion in sales. So this market is growing quick, and I suspect that some companies will surpass $1 billion in the last round. Earnings per share, and we see that our number 1 company in stock price is also our number 1 company in earnings per share. And we had one company here, let's see, that really greatly, SB Motors, I think, greatly and go from $6 earnings per share to $23 earnings per share, a huge increase in turning their company around. Okay, so that's the charts here. If we look at the leaderboard here, so we had a few companies, like I said, we had 5 companies earning over 600 points, and then 9 companies, almost 10 companies earning 500 points or higher. So a very successful round for a lot of players. Now the profit margins I had said last class, and I showed you in my demo, to get over 60%, and a number of companies have gotten over 60%. By round 6 is our last round that you guys are working on. All companies should be in the 60 percentile for round 6, and the companies who are currently in the 60 percentile here maybe strive to get to 70 percentile, which is possible. I've seen companies as high as 80 percentile gross profit margins by the end of the simulation. So a lot of these companies, if you're anywhere below 50%, you got to fix that, because after 6 years, and the majority of the industry at the 60%, high 50s and 60% level, you're really falling behind. So you got to really look at that, improving that. So all these companies here that are 45% or less, you have not made much of an impact in your overall profits percentage, your gross profit percentage, and that's making investors unhappy, and you're scoring under the 50 percentile mark of all teams that played the simulation. And the stock price we went over before, we have 180 all the way down to $18. So everybody's improved in stock market price, but some have improved much more than others. And it's just little decisions about investing in the company, setting your profit margins up, maybe sacrificing some sales that have higher profit margins is very viable. And we have our return on equity. This is the amount of money investors have invested in the company and your percentage return on that. We have the total points. So how many teams have already gotten A in this project? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams have already scored the full points for the project. That doesn't mean they stop playing, because you could lose points, but you're already pretty safely there. And we have a number of teams that only need 300 points to get to that 300 points or less to get to that 2,500, which should be no problem in the last round. And we have another number of teams here. Certainly for 1,800 points, it's not unheard of to get the remaining points to get an A in this project, or even get something close to an A. So a lot of companies are doing very well. Even companies at the back end here with low points, you could still have if you plan the company out right, you could get 600 to 900 points, putting you in a solid B category for this game. So the last round is very important to a lot of players, and those gross profit margins have to be high, and the operating profit margins, you don't want to overspend on advertising. You want to spend the efficient amount to get the maximum sales for what your production is. And the earnings per share, of course, is just translated per share. And when we look at return on assets, is how efficient. This should go up in the later rounds as you're buying. You probably maybe have bought all your research development, so that asset won't be as big. The only thing being increasing your assets at this point will buying new factories. And the net profit margin, the only thing you could really work on here is your interest efficiency, so paying down that debt. So the last round 6, whatever extra money you have, you pay down the maximum amount of debt and buy back the maximum amount of stock that you can, will greatly help your score. Okay, and then of course you want to increase your revenues, since most markets are increasing by 20 to 35%. You should be able to get your revenues up. The total asset turnover should be a little bit easier in the last round, because sales are going to escalate the fastest they have escalated as far as number of units. It'll still be the same percentage growth, but you can get your sales dollars up pretty high, and you're not going to be increasing your asset base as much in the last round. Just be very efficient. You don't want to have any leftover inventory. Could have hurt that score. Okay, so this is the last video I'm going to be making for our review session here, because this is the last round we're working on. So since we're not moving on after this, you don't need any more hints or review. Either by this point, either got the gist of this simulation or you didn't. So do the best you can in round 6, and I have noticed that the simulation has a new look and feel, where they seem to be backing up more data in the last year, and they just breaking things out a little bit differently. They have looks like they have some more pull downs now. Um, I turned off the reflective observation questions, so you won't see those. Uh, and they have, I guess, some graphics now. Just a little upgrade. I know this confused me at first too when it happened, because it happened in the middle of our progress here. But overall, it's the same simulation, just a little different, I guess. So best of luck in that last round. And really what the simulation was trying to teach you strategy-wise is that strategy isn't something that you just work on for a few minutes and throw some numbers together. The teams that did very well in this game actually took the time to plot their strategy. So strategy is sort of like playing a game of chess. You don't just make a move quickly after the other player makes a move. You take time to study the board, look at your options, and try to plan out other players' next moves into the future and what your best trajectory is. And the teams that really looked at, put the practice rounds in, played multiple practice rounds, thought about ways that they could outpace their competitors, and really put time into thinking about, if I make these decisions, how will that impact my profits, my sales? Those teams have done very well. The teams that have sort of not spent as much time thinking about how to compete, or teams that took the approach where, okay, we have 4 team members, you do round 4, you do round 2, you do round 3, I'll do round 1, and they kind of divided and conquered, divided the work up to make the project easier, will find themselves, it's very much difficult to perform well when you're not communicating as a team and working as one. So hopefully there's a lot of people who played in teams learn some team building aspects, and people who played individually, focus more on the strategy and the efficiency of deployment of that strategy, and have tied it into, as you noticed if you've been watching the lectures that I put together for this course, I do mention the simulation in lectures and talk about the simulation and ideas and concepts. So hopefully this was a good reinforcement all over of the class, and I hope you enjoyed the competitive aspect of the simulation. Okay, so best of luck in that last round, and I hope you do well, and I hope everyone's surpasses the 2,500 point minimum to get an A in this project. So thanks for playing along, and best of luck in the last round. Take care.